Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Walker and I'm a graduate student at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And today I'm interviewing Adam Ferguson, who is an engineer at Gingko Bioworks. Uh, Adam, let's talk about yourself.
Yeah, so I guess maybe we should get it out of the way that Jenny and I know each other from undergrad. We went to undergrad together at Rice and we both did bioengineering there. So after I graduated from Rice with a bioengineering degree, I was maybe kind of thinking about going to med school. I had done all the prereqs and stuff for that, but I ended up working for an NGS, next generation sequencing or NGS company called LaserGen. That had a sort of novel sequencing chemistry, and we're making a machine to do the sequencing. It was a pretty small company. It was like 20 people when I joined, and over the course of my time, I recruited like 40 or 45, I think. And it was eventually acquired by Agilent Technologies, which is a large biotech company. If you haven't heard of them. And I spent most of my time there working. I started as, I think my job title was associate scientist when I started. The first year was like running sequencing assays. We had a bunch of prototype sequencers, and then a lot of it shifted to sort of building successive prototype versions of an actual like sequencing machine. So when I was there, I think I started more kind of at the bench science side, and I started to do more hardware and software. And I decided that I was pretty into that side of it. So post Agilent acquiring the company, I had known about the company I work for now, Gingko Bioworks, for a little while, maybe a year or more, and just thought that what they were doing was really cool. And they had an automation engineering team, which sounded like more in the direction of what I was doing, more kind of hardware and software and supportive science. So I decided to apply to that, and then I got it. Now I'm here. I've been working at Gingko Bioworks for about a year, and my job title there is automation engineer.
Were there any specific classes at Rice that you took that strengthened your automation abilities, or was it all like on the job essentially from your first position?
I would say a lot of it was, quite a bit of it was on the job learning. I would say that like the Rice, the bioengineering degree, undergrad degree was definitely a solid foundation. I mean, valuable things that I did during my undergrad degree were definitely like spent a lot of time working in labs, which was like kind of a solid background, or at least some experience in doing research. I mean, not PhD level, but it's something. And I think a general exposure to like engineering principles was important. When it comes to specific classes, there isn't one that stands out as having been super valuable. Like broadly, I think that the bioengineering degree we did was exposed us to a lot of different areas. It was kind of like I think like many bioengineering degrees, it kind of like grew out of another engineering department at the school, right? So we did a little bit of electrical engineering. We took some mechanical engineering classes, and then we did some biochemistry and biology classes, and then some general engineering stuff like transport and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a good broad exposure, but more broad exposure than developing like deep expertise in one area.
So the team that you're on now at Gingko, is it predominantly like mechanical engineers or science, or is it just as broad as you are?
Yeah, it's super interdisciplinary. One of the things I love about it, we have people who major in chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, bioengineering, electrical engineering. Like it really covers the full gambit. Yeah.
So when you interviewed for this position, did you have to do a technical aspect where they would assess your programming? I've heard that's an element to a lot of jobs now.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure, like, actually when I went to interview. I had kind of prepared for like a programming interview. Um, the way we actually did it is I kind of administer a challenge that is like a it's like propose a solution for a laboratory test that you might have to automate, and sort of gives you some parameters for like, um, this is the process you're automating, this is the equipment you can use, like how would you do it, and propose a solution. It's pretty broad. um, and I don't know if a lot of other like automation groups do it that way. um, so in candidates, they're generally evaluated on like how they do on that automation challenge, and then rather than a specific programming challenge or something like that, it was kind of like, let's try and dive deep on some technical experience you've had in the past and like really talk about it, to get a sense of like, um, you know what you're doing. And I think we do it largely that way because our hiring, like our team's so diverse. Maybe if it was more concentrated, it's like, and programming is a large part of the job, but um, certainly we've hired people who have like deep expertise in another area, and they sort of learn programming on the job.
When you were job hunting, was it with the goal to wind up in Boston, or did you like see this one position, apply for it, and then just got it? Or yeah, what was that trajectory?
Yeah. So Rice was in Houston for people who are watching, I'm sure. Um, and this company that I started working for right out of college, the startup LaserGen, was just kind of happened to be in Houston. There are some biotech companies there, but biotech in general as an industry, I think is kind of unusually concentrated in a few areas. Um, San Francisco and Boston being the big ones. There's certainly biotech companies other places. I'm not saying they're not, and there are other cities that are that have a significant number, but Boston and San Francisco, I think, were kind of indisputably the biggest sort of hubs for it. So I had a feeling I would go to one of those places. But for me, it was less about the city and more about like a company I really liked. Um, so yeah, I had decided that I really wanted to work at actually Gingko Bioworks specifically. Um, so it was more about the company than the place. And maybe it'd be helpful to give a little bit of background on the company. I haven't talked that much about Gingko, but basically Gingko is a synthetic biology company. We focus on like organism engineering. So I think an example we like to give, and people in your program who are familiar with synthetic biology will be very familiar with this, but um, the idea behind the whole field, right, is that cells run on DNA code essentially. We can read and write DNA code, then you can program a cell, and a cell can essentially run a program to do something useful. In practice, it's a lot harder than that, but a customer might like come to us with an application they have in mind, for example. So an early one we did was kind of focusing on like cosmetics. So some like perfume companies, for example, might use like rose oil as an ingredient in their perfume, and rose oil is actually quite hard to make. It requires like harvesting tons of roses and like pressing them to get the rose oil out. So it's a labor-intensive and expensive process. But rose oil is, it's just a compound that the rose makes based on a gene that like encodes that rose oil. So if you take the gene out of the rose and move it into brewer's yeast, for example, is what we use for a lot of our projects, and get the brewer's yeast to express the rose oil, then you can kind of just brew it like beer, and instead of beer, you get rose oil. It's kind of like a nice packaged example. The applications are far more diverse than that. We have projects in so definitely flavors and fragrances in the food space, in medicines, in cannabinoids. One of the things that's really surprising about the company actually is the breadth of products that they do. It's like really pretty amazing. Anything that you might be able to imagine you could program a cell to do, anything that can be made by anything biological, can be made by a programmed cell. So yeah, that's kind of a brief overview of Gingko Bioworks, but I would encourage you to look this up if you want to know more.
Do you miss at all the bio benchwork, or are you happy to be on the other side now?
Yeah, no, I do. I think that it's sort of a personally, like I was a little bit happy to get away from Benchwork, but at the same time, it's sort of, you know, miss doing it all the time. You feel a little bit out of touch with science, but I think this is something that I've definitely heard friends talk about who are in biology in one form or another, that like Benchwork definitely has its pros and cons. Some people love it, some people like want to get away from it. I think I do miss it, but it's not like it's not a part of my job anymore. Everything that we're doing, everything that we're automating is in support of is in support of that benchwork, basically. So I mean, one of the reasons that Gingko has an automation team, right, is this process of engineering biology is not as predictable as you would like it to be. Right, you can move the gene from the rows into the brewer sheaths, but it's definitely still a process of trial and error. It doesn't just work the first time. So how do we do that like effectively these days is large scale. So you get a lot of shots on goal, basically. You can try a lot of different combinations. And one really effective way to do that is through really kind of flexible, powerful automation. So if you want to try 10,000 different combinations of genes, promoters, that kind of thing, then if you have a flexible automation platform, then running 10,000 samples is not that big of a deal. So I would say that I miss Benchwork in short, but also I think one of the things that inspired me to go be an automation engineer is that Benchwork can be quite repetitive. You know, everybody who's done it knows this. You know, you can spend however long getting a PhD. One of our founders, all of our founders are PhD synthetic biologists. One of them likes to say that like 90% of his PhD, right, was like moving liquids around at a bench, right? And when you spend 5 years becoming a highly trained scientist, it's like not the most effective use of your time to be pipetting all the time, as one example of like a repetitive lab operation. So I think it's like really powerful to basically take these highly trained scientists we have and make them, you know, superhuman by freeing them of having to do a lot of this repetitive bench work, right? They should be spending more time thinking and like using their scientific expertise than doing repetitive manual tasks.
No, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
You type up a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's see. Another question, similar then, is what was anything surprising about Gingko? You know, you wanted to work there, you interviewed, you liked it, they liked you. Was there anything that was surprising once you started working?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned like the breadth of projects that the company works on. I had like, you know, I knew quite a bit about it, or at least what was like, you know, what had been published was public about it beforehand. But still actually getting there and seeing it in practice, like the breadth of project was really, really surprising. Also, I don't know, I'm just like continually impressed by like the kind of the brilliance and expertise of the people that I'm working with every day. I don't know, I wouldn't say I was like surprised by that necessarily, but it's really cool. And I think one thing that was evident to me going in, at least the team I work on, was that it was really, one of the things I wanted to make sure when I was interviewing was that it was kind of a place that like supported growth, basically, like wasn't afraid to like throw you in the deep end on something that you didn't exactly know how to do and give you the resources to like figure it out and learn. And that's definitely been true in the year I've been working so far. At least I've definitely been thrown in on more than one project where I felt like I had no idea what I was doing, but I had all the resources available to me to like learn what I needed to learn.
Those resources, like other teammates and like
yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely like other teammates, other people from other areas of the company who are experts in something already. Or even if it means like, I don't know, materials or pieces of software or something like that. Yeah, that's been really good.
Let's see. So when you were coming out of undergrad, how many companies do you remember did you apply for?
Yeah. Coming straight out of undergrad, I thought I was gonna like try and go do an MD PhD actually. So I was actually just looking to work in like labs for the summer. And I saw this company that I ended up working for on like an email from a professor. And I knew about next generation sequencing because I was familiar with Illumina. And I thought like maybe it would be cool to work in industry for a year because I've worked in labs for at least a couple of years in undergrad. Maybe it'd be cool to try, a company before I go to med school. And I ended up liking it so much that I decided maybe med school like wasn't the right thing or it wasn't the right thing at the time. I wanted to keep pursuing it. So right out of undergrad, I didn't look at that many companies. Almost none actually. But from my second job to my first job to my job now, I looked at a lot. And I think knowing where to start with that can be intimidating and difficult. One thing I definitely did was even a couple of years out of college, I emailed some professors and asked them about companies they knew in various spaces. So that's like networking there was helpful, not just to like, not just to get an in at a company somewhere, like know somebody who actually worked there, but like networking in the sense of talking to someone who's knowledgeable about a space and figuring out what companies are doing interesting things in that space. Another thing I was doing was reading like industry sort of news outlets. There was one I read for quite a while called Genome Web that I think is sort of, some parts of it are behind a paywall, but Genome Web and Fierce Biotech were pretty good. And I was reading those for a while, just kind of like keep your thumb on like the pulse of an industry, and you see names of companies come up a few times, and that can be really, really helpful. Once you find like a company that you're interested in, it was useful for me, like so you sort of get a seat and then you can figure out who that company's competitors are. And actually for me, I was particularly interested in startups. And I think the most valuable thing that I did actually was find out who had invested in a startup that I was interested in, and then look at who else that investor had invested in. And I think this is like far more relevant for startups than established companies. But I mean, investors are a good source of, they're kind of trying to do the same thing that you're doing when you're looking for a job, is like figuring out who's a cool company, like who's doing interesting things that I think have value or could be really worth something one day. So they're looking at it from obviously a different angle, like who can I invest in? But looking at the portfolios of some investors who had invested in like Gingko, for example, gave me like a pretty good list of other companies to look at, to apply to.
Because Gingko is it publicly traded or is it still?
It is not. It's still privately traded. Most recently, we closed a Series E round, so it's, I think, a mature startup at this point.
Okay.
It's been around for more than 10 years, but initially, at least, it was small and grew slowly, probably for the first, I'd say, like 5 or 6 years of its existence. Yeah.
Yeah, I just assumed because it's so big.
It's about, I think we're about 300 people now. Yeah. So definitely a mature startup. I think the definition of a startup is kind of always up for debate. Some people definitely laugh when I say like, yeah, we're still a startup.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite definition of a startup that I've heard so far is like a company that still hasn't totally figured out their business model. Like if you don't have a working business model, you're kind of still a startup. And I think we have a good lead, but we don't have a proven business model yet. You could say. I mean, from my point of view, I think it looks good, but yeah. I mean, so some people say like, once you're past a certain size, you're not a startup anymore, or past a certain valuation, or publicly traded, or something like that. It's all kind of semantic at some point, but yeah. I think if you haven't totally nailed down your business model yet, you're still a startup.
For your like future, whether it's at Gingko or wherever you decide to jump to next, are you predominantly interested in maintaining fully technology side, or are you also considering business side, or if there is a secret third side that industry has?
Yeah, I don't know. It does seem like a lot of people feel like they have to make that trade-off. That like, once you get sufficiently advanced on like a technical track, and like you feel like you have to move into management to progress or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like you have to manage other people, and then in order to like get more responsibility. I don't think that's true at every company. It's definitely not true at Gingko. Certainly, like if you want to stay technical, you can do that. And yeah, personally, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's good to like try and plan your career out, but it's hard to plan too far in advance. I don't know. Like I just I think I'm pretty happy that I feel like I'm learning a lot right now, and I'm like satisfied with the role I'm in. So if that starts to change, then maybe I'll think about something like that.
Yeah, when you stop being challenged, then it's like time to do something.
Yeah, there are people at Gingko who have jumped from like a technical team to commercial development team, the business team. Like I can't really speak to how common that is outside of the companies that I've worked at. Generally, companies that are startups, they kind of the promise of a startup, right, is that like it's less sure, and you certainly get paid less, especially at small startups. But it's kind of like a risk-reward trade-off. You take greater risk, you potentially get greater reward, which is usually in the form of like partial ownership in the company somehow, or the potential for like rapid advancement. So it may be, I think, harder to make that jump from like a technical track to a purely business track without, you could like, there's technical management or something like that, but purely technical to purely business track may be more difficult in a very established company. Yeah. One thing I'm not sure about is that I think a lot of people, like I went straight into industry after undergrad, especially in biotech. I think it's a lot of times par for the course to have a PhD. So having that PhD affords a lot of flexibility. There's a question for like that. I mean, hangs over my head a little bit, and I think other people who are in biotech that I know who don't have PhDs feel like maybe there's a little bit of a pressure to go back to school. I think that's on a company by company basis. I'm certainly like at my current company, in my current role, I think it's fine. I feel like there's certainly enough headroom for advancement and stuff like that, and it's not like PhD is totally required or something like that. I don't know if this is that relevant for people who are watching, because it should all be in a PhD program, right?
No, that's perfect. Like anyone can watch this.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. To get a PhD or not to get a PhD was something I asked people quite a bit.
And they're like, no, get the MD PhD.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot of school. And I've gotten varying answers on that. I think the most common thing I've heard is that essentially, like, in biology or biotech, it can be a little bit difficult to I don't want to put this the wrong way, but it can be a little bit difficult to point to concrete skills, maybe, or accomplishments. I mean, like, you can say, like, I know how to run these assays or whatever, but like, in an area that can be kind of like fuzzy or difficult to understand, and there's tons of breadth in, like, a PhD is a nice, like, solid thing that can say, like, I've done something hard, and I'm qualified. And as a result, it is sort of useful as a signal to, like, employers and stuff like that, that you're competent.
Yeah, from this side, it's told a lot that what employers appreciate from a PhD is that you have clearly done, like, critical thinking. You can work hard through years of troubleshooting.
Yeah.
And essentially, to me, from this side of the, fence, it looks like if you had that experience in industry, like, what is the difference?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. PhD is definitely a sign of that. Everybody who I've talked to who comes out of a PhD says that they really learned how to fake it, training and research, and, like, how to work yourself out of a hard problem that there are no answers for. It's not like somebody's fixed it before. Yeah, I think I at least for now, like, I've gone more into hardware, software, kind of like a little bit more traditional engineering disciplines. And it's certainly less of a I don't know, I don't want to say stigma, but less of a requirement there, I guess. That said, there are certainly, like, very smart people at Gingko who have accomplished a lot and done very well, who don't have PhDs, and they're completely involved in the synthetic biology side of things.
What has been one of the most, like, challenging things you've had to deal with while at Gingko? Whether it's like a project or people.
Um, I think right now this is especially evident because we have a bunch of coronavirus projects going on. So it can feel quite hectic at times, and I think that communicating effectively is very important, in industry, at least, like, in a big organization. The communication has to be done well, otherwise, like, you get these sort of insular cells of people that are not well connected, and you get duplication of work and people working on the wrong things. So effective communication has been difficult, but I think that a company is sort of just a group of people that are all working towards a common goal, right? I've heard things before that are like, if you get all the arrows kind of lined up in the right direction, like, a company's progress, or, like, is everybody in the company is an arrow and they're all pointing in the same direction. Company progress is sort of like the vector sum of all those arrows, right? So certainly there have been, like, a lot of technical challenges. I've had to learn a lot of new things to solve them, but, like, making sure that you're working on the most important thing all the time is difficult. It's really hard, because I don't know of a company where there isn't, like, more work to do than you have time for. So, like, really focusing on the most important thing at the time can be difficult. Yeah.
And that's like you have to make that call.
Yeah, or you have to make that call like in conjunction with your manager.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, or to be a really effective employee, if you think that's not the case, like it's kind of your responsibility to say something about it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and tell your manager, something like that. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the harder things that I've had to do.
Like fit in with the communication style, or
Yeah,
like focus on that.
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just there's a lot of priorities, so like prioritizing them correctly and doing the most important things first can be difficult when there's a lot of conflicting priorities and a lot of people want a lot of different things from you. Um, I think it's the case for everybody, at least in my company. Um, yeah.
Ooh, okay, then let's not on a happier.
I mean, I don't want to. I don't want that to seem like not happy. I'm just trying to think that that's actually like the most difficult thing that I've had to do. But yeah, I think the other more difficult things are like things that I had more of an akin experience to in academia, which is like there's a hard problem and the answer isn't really in a book somewhere. So you have to like use what resources you have available to you to figure it out. But I think that's something that a lot of people who have done hard stuff in academia also have plenty of experience in.
Ooh, yeah, except that we have also access to like so many publications.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, any science company worth its salt, you'll have access to those publications too.
Good. That's my concern. I was like, oh my god, how do people continue to learn?
Yeah, yeah, you get papers for sure.
I will end the interview now, but I will give you an opportunity if there's anything else you feel like you have left unsaid, or if you want to plug anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'll plug Gingko for sure. I mean, I think it's awesome. I think we're doing super cool work. I'm really happy to work there. Like I said, it was my number one choice for a job after my last job. So I would encourage people to check us out. I mean, if you just Google Gingko Bioworks, like our webpage will come up. We're hiring. So feel free to apply and feel free to reach out to me. I mean, Jenny, you can put my contact info in whatever form this goes out in. I'm happy to talk to people about it. Yeah, check out Gingko Bioworks.
Yeah, it was really cool. Adam gave me a tour, and it's a really cool setup. So if you're ever in Boston, make it a tour.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Adam.